Hey everyone, it's Professor Cepek. This is my first attempt to do a little lecture video for you. I've never done this before, so we'll see how it goes. You might hear my dogs barking as well, so hopefully you'll get a chance to meet them all. Anyways, as you know via the emails, I'm sorry about this situation. We're doing the best we can, and please just give me tons of feedback. Let me know what's working, what's not working. Um, and we'll try to make it as good as we can. So, what I'm going to do right now is try to go very quickly through the PowerPoint that I'm going to post up as a PDF, as I always did, and just talk about some of the points. Some of you told me it really helps to see me talk and to listen to me. And I'll try to do that quickly. And maybe at a certain point in the future, I'll go through that quickly and then talk a little bit more for those who want to listen for more than 5 or 10 minutes. So we'll just see how this goes. Anyways, because of the condensed timeline and the time we've lost, we're actually having to put readings together that I didn't intend to teach together. And today is the first day of that. So I'm going to talk about chapters 3 and 4 of Life in Oil, my book about Cofán people in the oil industry. Chapter 3 is about this historical figure, the founder of the community of Dureno, Yaje, who was a shaman, and it's also about shamanism and illness, and Alejandro as a shaman. And chapter 4 is about colonization, the coming of the cocama, who are the non-indigenous outsiders who now far outnumber Cofán and other indigenous people in Cofán territory. And everybody thinks about oil in Cofán territory and pollution and the health problems pollution causes as being its most disastrous effects. But actually, loss of territory due to other people taking it over, non-indigenous settlers, has been in many ways just as catastrophic, if not more catastrophic. And also living alongside these newcomers has become a huge problem in terms of how Cofán people think about themselves, how they move through their land, and how they worry about their own culture and identity kind of transforming into cocama or non-indigenous culture and identity. So that's what chapter 4 is about. So as you'll see on the PowerPoint, the first slide here, I've taken off all the in-class practices. And I've taken off all the reading responses. So I'm going to replace those with a first slide that says your discussion board posts. And maybe at this point, I'll talk about some larger points that have been brought up in discussion from the last class period. But it's just there to kind of remind you that that's what you're supposed to be doing. You can either do it before these lectures are posted or after. You have some time. I think it was 48 hours. To post your comment and then reply to another person's comment. So keep doing that. Take it as far as you want. Post as much as you want. That's where the discussion component of this course will happen mainly. So here is what I was going to do as a practice if we did this class in person, but of course we can't do that now. So I have 3 YouTube clips here, and if you want to watch these, and you should, you have to paste those exact words, and they're all in ANT, the Cofán language, and that's so other people can't find them. But people I want to see them, they can be public for them. So in these 3 clips, you have Alejandro, curing a child. Then you have Cesario, the shaman I'm working with, him curing somebody. And then you have a video called Grefatsa on yaje maku icho. That's a video that actually Hugo Lusitante took about 10-15 years ago while a big group of us were drinking yaje or ayahuasca in a Cofán shaman's house. And for a split second there, you'll see me lying on the floor with some stomach problems and hallucinating. But it's mainly other Cofán people. But it's pretty interesting. It just gives you a really great sense of what it's like to have 2 or 3 Cofán shamans chanting and curing, and people lying down and being cured, being rubbed and blown on and sucked on, and just what it looks like for a big collective curing session to occur. And maybe you'll want to write your responses about those videos. What did you see in those videos? What looked like what you read in the book, and what looked different? And if you want to ask me a question about what you saw in those videos, about my own experiences or Cofán shamanism in general, that would be a great thing to put on the discussion boards for chapters 3 and 4, because it's about shamanism, and my new project is about Cofán shamanism in general, so I know a lot more about it now than I actually did when I wrote this book. So Yoriye, whose real name was Guillermo Kenema, was a famous Cofán shaman, founded Durango, born very early in the 20th century. We don't know exactly when. Um, he actually did a lot of his shamanic training with other indigenous people, Siona. That's something very common for Cofán shamans, the idea of being trained by others and then returning to your society. And Durango was probably created in 1941 when he went there and he kankian it, or made it into a kanke, or community. So people in Durango now really talk about how much they revere Yuriye, but they also really feared him a lot when he was alive. People depend upon Cofán shamans, but they also really fear them because the power to cure is also the power to harm and even to kill people. And Yoriye was one of these figures who could keep you safe and cure you, but if you didn't do what he wanted to, what he wanted you to, then he could also kill you. So that's really the root of political power and why shamans are leaders in Cofán society. Cofán shamans can do a number of things. They protect a community from looming supernatural attacks, whether demons or attacking shamans from other communities. They can keep anacondas away, jaguars away, biting snakes away. But if their protection isn't enough, they can actually cure you of being attacked through a number of means. They have these supernatural stones or glass shards or bones inside their bodies, usually kept inside their arms, that are called davu. And if you have those, that means you can see the davu that were sent by other shamans into a sick person's body. And if you have them, you can see them and then remove them and keep that davu for yourself and make it your own weapon, or blow it away somewhere where it will stay away from the people who follow you and make sure they're safe. Shamans also in Cofán society used to have the capacity to tseye or nyonyanye, game animals, to actually call them from the forest or create them or make them by communicating with their spirit masters. Something a lot of people have heard about, and it's probably a common image of Amazonian shamans. Really the main metaphor for them as an animal is the tesi or jaguar. So shamans like Yoriye and other powerful shamans had the power and the ability to transform themselves into jaguars, to walk in the waking world as jaguars, to kill if they wanted to, or to fight their enemies. And they could also command jaguars, as well as anacondas. Those are the two big predatory animals. Shamans could also transform into kukuya, various kind of supernatural malevolent figures or demons, to heal people and also to attack people. And they can also command other allied kukuya to do their bidding, to heal people or to attack people. And Yoriye was a master at all of that. So on this slide, you have just a list of the main supernatural beings, the categories in Cofán cosmology. So kukuya, what I was just talking about, I translated as demon. This is a bad thing, a thing that can kill. Aya is kind of like a ghost, something that is released from all of our bodies when we die. Our soul, our kantsepa, either disappears or goes into heaven or hell if you're a Christian Cofán now. But then the other half of you becomes this kind of like rotting skeleton or bone demon. And these two can attack people, and shamans have to cure those people. That's one thing Alejandro can do. He's very good at curing children whose souls have been stolen by Aya, by basically ghosts. And then there's the word Ai, which usually means human being or Cofán human being, but there are all sorts of supernatural Ai out there in the world too, like the yaje Ai, the people of Yaje. And they're usually benevolent. They usually help the shaman, they help people, but they also are shamans themselves and have tremendous powers to commit violence if you're not, let's say, following the taboos or prohibitions for maintaining yourself in a contaminated, free of contamination state. So they can become very angry with you, especially if they've made you your friend and given you their powers as you've learned to be a shaman. So these yaje ai especially can be men, can be women, can be children, but they're immortal. They were never born and they never die. They don't have sex, don't menstruate, don't give birth. But these are the people. This is why Cofán people paint their faces and put on all their beads and their feathers when they drink yaje, it's because this is what the yaje people look like. And if they think you're beautiful and you smell beautiful, Cofán people put all sorts of plant perfumes on their body too. When they're drinking yaje, these people will want to approach you and become your ally, your friend. And that's how you acquire a lot of your shamanic power. So as I mentioned before, I won't go over the slide in detail, but in order to acquire and maintain shamanic power, you must maintain a clean body, and that means a body that has no traces of reproductive blood, either blood from pregnancy or blood from childbirth. And Cofán people think that both fathers and mothers become pregnant in the same ways. As a man, you'll say, I'm pregnant. If your wife is pregnant, that means you've got this reproductive blood in your body. And if you touch a shaman or give someone who's trying to become a shaman some food you cooked, or just give them something you've touched or walk across their path, they will become contaminated. They'll lose their powers. The yaje people will become angry with and disgusted by them, and they will become terribly sick, and another shaman will have to save them. So following these taboos and prohibitions, which are largely about sex and trying to stay away from any kind of sexual or reproductive activity, are very important in shamanism for Cofán people and most Amazonian people. Cofán people usually drink yaje in what you call the yaje tsa'o, or yaje house. This is a picture of Alejandro's yaje house in Doreno, a big, huge structure where you can have 30, 40 people all drinking yaje at the same time. Cofán people actually said they do drink the yaje. It's a vine, Banisteriopsis caapi. They drink it alone. But it's only truly powerful and gives you good visions when you mix it with a couple of other species, plant species. The main ones they use, they call opirito and yaje oko. If you put one of these in, the visions are much more intense, much more colorful, much more clear. So people all go together to the yaje house. Well, they don't go together. The young men go there first. They work for the shaman, kind of. They boil the yaje, they prepare it. The shaman arrives later. And then everybody else comes to either drink yaje to become cured, or just to sit, hang out, watch. People laugh, they tell stories, they joke, they smoke all night long. And the shaman is just there chanting and curing and laughing along with them. It's really a pretty interesting scene. And I've got like tons of footage of this from my field work now. You expect it to be very reverent and sacred, but the shaman's telling jokes about sex and pooping and farting and all this kind of stuff right when he's like sucking like weapons out of people's bodies. And it's not what we think of as like sacred or holy activity. It's very, very bodily, very profane. So it's really interesting to see, and it's actually a lot of fun if you're not, drinking yaje and puking and peeing and vomiting and all over yourself, because that sometimes happens when you drink yaje, especially if you don't follow the prohibitions. So in order to cure people, shamans can do it while drinking yaje or even without drinking yaje if they're already powerful enough. And they really want to look inside a person's body to see what kind of projectiles are stuck in there, or they look inside a person's body to see if that person's soul, their kansepa, has been stolen by another kukuya, a malevolent being or a shaman. And then the shaman who's trying to cure you has to go confront that being and kind of get the soul back from it, put it back into the person's body. That's how you cure them. That's how they return to health. Or if they have an enemy weapon inside their body, like davu, you need to suck that out of a person's body. I think I told you the story about me being cured by a shaman, Cesario, a couple of years ago when I was having some bad trouble, and he saw inside my flesh white supernatural snails that were eating kind of dead, rotting flesh in me, and he actually put his mouth on my stomach and just sucked them out and spit them away. And I don't know how, but it worked. And I was cured the next day. And when a shaman is doing this, all of these other allies of the shaman, whether they're different kinds of ai, supernatural people, or even kukuya, they kind of gather around him. You can't see them, but the shaman can see them. They point. They're like doctors looking at the sick person's body, telling the shaman in their own languages, oh, this is what's happening. Take this out. Use this. Do this. Do this. So it's a really collective supernatural event for the shaman. And of course, I've just heard about it. I haven't seen these beings myself yet. This is a picture of Alejandro. Those are perfumed leaves he's putting on his arms, and you can see he's painting his face there. He's got his beautiful beads on. He ended up actually, I think he sold his feather headdress to a tourist or something because he needed money. So he's only got a beaded band on there instead of a headdress. He's preparing to drink yaje there in Dureno. I think I drank that night too. Um, so, in order, as I said before, in order to be able to cure somebody, you need to speak the language of violence. And that means you're able to harm people and even to kill them. So, Westerners often think about shamans as these like very benign, benevolent, pure, moral beings. But for Cofán people, they're really tricky because the same person who can save you and cure you is the person who inspires fear in you and can kill you. And that's even the case for Alejandro. People were afraid of him doing something to them. I remember a young girl came one day and said, I was at this party and I felt you like shoot something into me. And he's like, what are you talking about? And she's like, thought, you didn't attack me. It's very strange because this is somebody you know and like and makes you laugh, but then you're afraid maybe they're killing you at the same time. It's a really interesting, very different cultural phenomenon. It's really hard for us as Westerners to get our heads around that this being can be both pure good and pure evil at the same time. So anyways, I can talk a lot more about that, and if you have questions, I will in the future. So here's Yaje shortly before his death with a young child and his wife, who I talk about in the book using a pseudonym. He was a very powerful shaman. He was very healthy. Then he was visiting his cousin in another community, coming back and stopped at a Texaco base camp. Some workers came up. They gave him some liquor. They got him drunk. And Cofán people said these Texaco workers strangled him because they wanted to seduce his wife, who you can see here. He did die. We're not quite sure exactly how or why, whether he choked on his vomit or was actually strangled. There's no way to know, but Cofán people are convinced that the compañía, Texaco, killed him in order to steal away his wife and, remove the Cofán's primary protector at the time, who was Yaje, who could actually, from the Cofán perspective, really hurt the oil company workers. There's a story about him killing dozens of them by he turned into an anaconda and flipped over their canoe in the river and they all drowned. So without him, they were afraid of him, as I said, but he could protect them from others. And once he was gone, nobody could do that anymore. Yeah, that's the way I kind of end this chapter, just talking about the death of this figure and really the end of the really powerful Cofán shamans and how central shamanism was in Cofán life. There are still Cofán shamans. People still get cured by shamans. People still drink yaje. But folks like Yaje, there aren't many left. Although the guy I'm working with now is pretty good, and he's working with another guy I've gotten to know who supposedly is really powerful. I don't know if he can call game, but he can turn into all sorts of cucuya and has all sorts of weapons. I've got some very interesting footage of him at night chanting and sucking things out of people's bodies. So, there's always this way of like saying, oh, in the old days, we really had the powerful shamans. But who knows, in 20 years, people might say that about Alejandro. We tend to really glorify people after they're already gone. And I think Cofán people are prone to do the same kinds of things. So actually, this final slide is really about Alejandro as a shaman. He's, by all accounts, not that powerful. He doesn't have any Davu spirit weapons. He can't turn into a cucuya. He can't call game. He can cure people, especially children, when their souls have been captured by the aya, by these bone demons or ghosts. And actually, shamanism now it's a way he makes money. All these outsiders come in. They want to be cured by him. They want to drink yaje with him, and they pay him. And he's happy to do it. He's happy these outsiders come from so far away, North America, Europe, and kind of worship him and kind of makes him giggle, but it's respect and it's income. And, they don't know anything about Cofán shamanism. They write their stereotypes of this like kind of wise, benevolent healer onto him. They don't know what a joker he is and what a character he is. And they don't know about, the shamans who can turn into jaguars and who kill people and who are kind of evil. But that's fine for Alejandro. He needs the money. He appreciates the respect. And he's going to keep on working with these tourists and these outsiders to make an income so he can provide for Lucia and for Roberto. So something you might want to write about in your discussion questions is whether you think there's anything wrong with that idea of these outsiders, maybe you yourself, going to Doreno and drinking yaje with Alejandro without really knowing anything about Cofán culture or Cofán shamanism. Are we perverting this practice? Are we being disrespectful towards it? Or should we leave it up to Alejandro? If he wants to make money and give folks yaje to drink, even if they don't know anything about it, is that fine? And would you yourself drink it if you had the chance? As I've said many times, it's not supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be hard. You're supposed to suffer. But there's very interesting research now about hallucinogens and the fact they may be curative for Westerners in all sorts of ways we don't quite understand. So now, there are people in San Antonio drinking yaje, which is usually called ayahuasca. One of my mother's friends in San Antonio, when she was in town, he's this kind of conservative Jewish guy, and says, "Oh, I'm gonna go drink ayahuasca tonight." And I was like, "What? Who the hell is he drinking ayahuasca with?" But there's people here in San Antonio and all over Europe and North America now drinking this in their own ways. And there's my dog barking. So anyways, chapter 4 is about the coming of the cocama and the expropriation of Cofán territory and the building of this oil infrastructure. And one of the points I try to get across in this chapter is how much these outsiders just inspire fear in Cofán people. They were afraid of being killed and captured and given epidemic disease, which we can all relate to right now, by these outsiders. And I heard these stories, but I'm like, oh, these are just these non-indigenous people. They don't mean anything bad. And there was a moment I write about in chapter 4 where this guy here, who gave me a fake name, started asking me questions, and Cofán people decided that he wanted to kidnap me and keep me for a ransom. And at that point, I became terrified of any non-Cofán person, and I really understood what it's like to have this invasion of your territory and this absolute terror with these powerful, numerous others who you assume to be violent captors and even killers. And that's kind of another thing in anthropology, right? You want to be objective, you want to stay distanced, but only sometimes when you really get close and feel what people feel do you really understand their culture in a more immediate way. And it's a very subjective process, but that's essential to ethnography. And that's the way I start off this chapter, talking about the invasion of Cofán territory by these non-indigenous outsiders. So I list all the different kinds of cocama, or non-indigenous Spanish speakers, who've moved into and out of Cofán territory since the 1500s. There were soldiers, there were priests, there were the oil companies workers, there were these merchants, colonists, rubber workers. And most of them were objects of fear for Cofán people, and they killed a lot of Cofán people. These epidemic diseases killed hundreds, thousands of Cofán people: measles, whooping cough, influenza. Coronavirus is there now. And I was just talking to the son of a shaman who told me his father drank yaje and saw that coronavirus was released by a demon who lives in a volcano, and that's where it came from. It didn't come from bats, so you hear it from the source. So anyways, that's what these outsiders have meant. That's what the non-indigenous settlement of Cofán territory has meant. It's meant loss of land. It's meant sexual violence. It's meant epidemic disease. It's meant physical violence of other kinds. It's meant fear and terror. And as I said at the beginning of this lecture, in many ways that has been just as painful, if not more painful, than what oil has done ecologically to Cofán people's territory. Here's a map of Doreno that you saw in the book, with just all of the oil infrastructure that really surrounds Doreno, this little tiny island of forest. There's been oil camps built right inside the village with dozens of workers just staying there doing various kinds of oil work. Seismic testing, it's a process of exploring for oil. You have to make these trails through the forest, a grid, detonate dynamite, explosives. You feel the ground shake. I was there during seismic exploration in 2013, I think it was, and it's just amazing what it does. Then if you find some deposits through that seismic exploration, you see the kind of seismic waves on a map, and there's geologists who can say where oil might be located. You have to drill these exploratory wells. Sometimes they're dry, and sometimes you find oil. And they found quite a bit of oil, of course, in Doreno. And then once you find oil, you need to build all those roads and pipelines and processing facilities to get that oil out. And once you have the roads, like you see on this map, that means that outsiders come in and they take away indigenous people's land. And 90% of Cofán territory has been taken away from Cofán people. They have about 1 million acres they legally control now, but that's just a small fraction of the 10 or 20 million acres they used before the cocama, the outsiders, came. Most of these outsiders are just poor people looking for land. A lot of them really aren't to be blamed. Some of them are indigenous people from the highlands. Sometimes they came just on their own, trying to scrape a life out. Sometimes they were part of government colonization programs. They took over all land that they found. They didn't really care if indigenous people called it their own land. They just kind of rolled over indigenous communities. Finally, at the end of the 1970s, the Cofán people in Doreno got a title to their land and created boundaries around it so they could protect it from further colonization. That's only about 9,500 hectares, about 24,000 acres. Once again, out of millions of acres that they used before. And that's the tiny plot of forest that most of them use to survive right now. Some of them still hunt and fish outside of it, but if you go on a cocama's land and that cocama finds you, they will threaten to kill you, or they actually will kill you. So it takes a lot of courage and bravery to hunt on non-titled territory, but some people still do it because they're that hungry. So, of course, the cocama, as I've been saying, the invasion of Cofán territory was overwhelmingly negative for Cofán people, but they also brought in these amazing goods and technology that Cofán people love these days. Clothing, music, medicine, technology. As I mentioned, I think in the last chapter, ask Roberto, what it would be like to give up his smartphone, and he's like, hell no, I want to keep that, forever. So these outsiders brought loss of land and sickness and violence, but they also brought things that just make life a little bit better. But of course, that also means you need to make money to live. So the entrance of the cocama meant a real drastic change in the Cofán way of life. You don't just use the forest and your own labor to get what you need to live. You need to start getting money by selling your labor or selling something else in order to buy things that frankly now are necessities. There's not enough land in Doreno for everybody to grow or hunt or fish their own food. There are new sicknesses now that Cofán people didn't have before that they need Western healthcare to deal with, and getting that healthcare demands money. So they're kind of in a bind now. All the outsiders who came before, they eventually left over the centuries. When the people came with oil, the cocama came with the oil infrastructure, Cofán people thought they would leave too, but they never did. A lot of people asked the Cofán, why don't you stop them? But they're like, well, we didn't know who these people were. We thought they'd come, stay for a few years, and then leave. But they didn't. And now Cofán life has become radically different. And just the final slide here, picture of Roberto. I'm just curious what you all think, In 20 years, who will he be? Will he still be speaking Ainge? Will he be drinking yaje? Will he wear a tunic like Alejandro? Or will he listen to, cocama music and eat cocama food and wear cocama clothes and just speak Spanish and become a cocama? That's what Alejandro and Lucia are very worried about. Roberto, of course, would always say, no, of course, I'll always be a Cofán. But when I was writing this book, he was just a young teenager. I think, as you've heard me say, after I finished, he actually did get married. He's married now. He married a young Cofán girl, has a Cofán kid, and seems very rooted in Cofán culture. But I could have seen it working differently. And I'm curious what y'all think about Cofán culture and its future with this cocama invasion. So let me go back to the recorder here. I've been talking for half an hour almost, and I said 5 or 10 minutes, but this was the first one. So if you didn't watch it all, that's fine. If you did, even better. I'll try to shorten it in the future. So stay safe, give me some feedback, and we'll talk to y'all soon. Bye-bye.